and digitalization. Ladies and gentlemen, a lot changed since time immemorial when we look at to the shipping. However, one constant remained the same. Always shipping technology and navigation technology have improved. And for instance, after the sailing era period, we have been introduced to the diesel and steam engines, and then this was a revolutionary shift for the roles of seafarers and also for world in general. It changed many things from the past. And especially in the recent decades, the technology started to evolve faster because we have accumulated so much. Nowadays, it's not taking ages to make one invention, but these are happening rather quickly. For instance, especially after 1965, we have witnessed the containerization, satellite-based communication, AIS, then ballast water management, anti-fouling systems, software for voyage monitoring and cargo tracking. And these also meant shifts and changes in the roles and tasks of seafarers. And nowadays, ladies and gentlemen, we are in the era of automation, and there is a possibility that there can be further refinements, further changes, further shifts in shipping, including the tasks of seafarers. Very briefly, I would like to note that IMO has a very broad mandate under United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea to regulate international shipping. And IMO's mandate is indeed very strong because its mandate depends on its constituent treaty, 1948 convention, but also some 50 conventions which were adopted under the auspices of the organization, as well as its mandate was enhanced by UNCLOS itself. Ladies and gentlemen, IMO was never shy to address technological developments, and indeed addressed these, especially with the safety concerns. For instance, the introduction of steel hull tankers, the polar class navigation, electronic chart display, so on and so forth. And IMO has two different kinds of treaties. First kind of treaties are perhaps mostly reactive to tragic disasters, oil spills, so on and so forth, like SOLAS was adopted in the aftermath of Titanic, and then Torrey Canyon, Erika, Prestige incidents led to the establishment of legal committee and legal committees treaties, and Namoka Cadiz, salvage convention, so on and so forth. And when we look at maritime autonomous surface ships, as I will briefly touch upon, there are different degrees of autonomy, ranging from semi-autonomous to fully autonomous degrees. However, I'm also pleased to note that IMO has recently adopted an understanding which entails that even for the fully autonomous degree, which is degree 4, there will be always human master at all times, either on board or on shore, to reassume the control if things get wrong. Another thing I would like to note that there is a lot of confusion, which is quite natural because this is an evolving matter. Ladies and gentlemen, maritime autonomous surface ships do not equal to fully autonomous ships. Fully autonomous ships is just one of the categories. And really and truly, when we talk about maritime autonomous surface ships, in my view, we are talking about increased automation. We are not talking about true autonomy yet. Perhaps in the future we can get there, but right now we are mostly in the realm of remote operations where human element is still essential. In this context, IMO conducted a regulatory scoping exercise through its various committees, and I will not go into the details because of the time constraints, but IMO has been diligently working on this matter, and I will explain a bit further in the next slides. Due to changing times, people are also changing, generations are changing, and we note that the supply of seafarers or the interest of younger generations to become seafarers is decreasing. And perhaps in this context, mass can be a useful tool. Because, for instance, according to statistics, although we need to be careful about statistics, as Mark Twain once said, there are three types of lies: lies, damned lies, and statistics. But nonetheless, we need to consider them. And according to one statistic I have seen, by next year we will have shortage of 150,000 seafarers. And perhaps increased automation can make it up or can complement this shortage. But this will not be obviously automatic, and we need to upskill or reskill our seafarers so that they can be able to keep up to date themselves with increased technology, so that they can serve and they can work with these technologies. And sometimes also there is another confusion that colleagues think that maritime autonomous surface ships will cause loss of job. I would certainly disagree with that, especially in the initial decades to come. On the contrary, perhaps we will create more jobs. Because, for instance, if you look at the example of aviation, drones, aircrafts can be flown by 2 pilots, but a drone needs a minimum number of 4 pilots at a remote location on the land. And the same thing will probably happen for the remote operation centers, but which will require new tasks and upskilling of seafarers. In the era of autonomy, we have new actors, new concepts, new terms, and remote operators are the modern equivalents of the seafarers. And it is naturally will be more smooth transition if we can get seafarers with actual sea experience, with navigation experience, but upon training them for autonomous technologies, they will be able to work at remote operation centers, which is located other than the ship itself, which will be commanding and controlling the ship. But what kind of skills we need? The skills will naturally depend according to the size, class, and the route of these ships. And moreover, the nature of cargo will be an important element to consider. So please rest assured, humans are not going anywhere, at least for the foreseeable future. Human element will still be there, will still be in the loop. And seafarers will be critical in the successful and safe integration of autonomous technologies into the shipping. But in this regard, obviously, they will be able to upskill in cargo handling and stowage of these vessels, maintenance and repair, communications, engineering, so and so forth. And technology usually, and hopefully, it will be the same case in the autonomous ships as well. It will improve the working conditions of the seafarers, and they will also contribute significantly to ensure safety of navigation. And perhaps due to the changing nature of remote operation centers, since the seafarers will be able to go to their loved ones at the end of their shifts, perhaps there will be more interest in the younger generations and women to apply for these positions. Another thing, ladies and gentlemen, we have to note that even if the autonomous ships are introduced, the current generations of ships, which is around 50,000 ships, they will not disappear in a day. They will be serving for decades to come. Therefore, there will be coexistence, and these systems need to be interoperable, and we shouldn't confuse the already well-working system of traditional shipping. And another thing, that these vessels, although they might have technological capabilities, depending on their location, even in a single journey, perhaps if the port state necessitates, they will have to use manual manned ship. So therefore, they will change their navigation mode, perhaps between degree 1 and degree 3, and also they will be going to manual shipping, which is pretty much the degree 1. Another nitty-gritty thing that we haven't yet considered thoroughly is the issue of access to ports. In general, there is a misconception that there is a right for ships to have access to foreign ports. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no such right in international law. This is a privilege given by states to the ships. Obviously, if they wish to generate more incomes, they will be more welcoming. But on the other hand, they don't have to let autonomous ships into their ports. Therefore, the concerns of the port states and coastal states need to be addressed as well. As I said in the beginning of my presentation, there are many unknowns, as this is an evolving issue. But I'm happy to note that we have already a roadmap, and especially Maritime Safety Committee, in cooperation with other committees, made a significant progress in drafting the Maritime Autonomous Surface Ships Code, which largely regulates the safety aspects of these vessels. And next year, we expect that a non-mandatory, goal-based instrument will be adopted, and again, we expect that by 2030, a binding version of this instrument will be adopted based on the experiences will be gained along the way, and it is expected that if the states so desire, that it may come into force by 2032. But only time will tell us, and there is a long way to go. I'm saying there is a long way to go, not because of technological worries or legal issues, because the law is there to assist and to ensure progressive development. So we have tools to address. But I'm saying this mostly for practical reasons. For instance, who will load or unload cargo to such vessels? Who will connect and disconnect hoses? Who will clean the salt on board the ship? Who will clean the spills? Who will clean the birds? So there are many things, like maintenance is a big issue. Even if you can have a remote master, I think it is far more difficult to have a remote chief engineer. Without his tools, without being physically present on board, it will be extremely difficult to maintain and lubricate the hatches or oversee the cargo operations or conditions of the cargo. And another thing, you may wish to note that commercial ships serve only one purpose, which is international trade. So unless the ship owners, unless the traders are interested in owning or chartering mass, then we will not be seeing anything quite like that, because they will not be able to be part of the supply chains. So therefore, ladies and gentlemen, success of mass does not depend only on technological feasibility, but also industry and market acceptance. The upskilling and reskilling of seafarers is not only relevant in the context of autonomous ships, but also, as we have been hearing from Mr. Secretary General and Mr. Honders this morning about alternative fuels. So they need to be able to deal and take care of these fuels. And we have very ambitious goals to reach zero emission levels by 2050s. So therefore, they will be very helpful, but certain technical skills will need to be acquired by seafarers to address these issues, or energy efficiency measures, or prevention of emission issues, so on and so forth. But more importantly, ladies and gentlemen, The alternative fuels, like ammonia, hydrogen, methanol, are reportedly toxic, highly flammable, and corrosive, which requires fuel handling trainings, bunkering and storage training, transfer trainings, and seafarers need to be trained for personal protective equipments and emergency responses. If incidents happens, if there is spill, there will be different kinds and protocols for addressing these alternative fuels. And in fact, one of the indirect benefits of autonomy, increased autonomy, can be the fact that since diesel engines are requiring quite significant maintenance along the journey out there on the seas, autonomous ships are expected to be using electric engines. And electric engines are more environment friendly, and unlike diesel, they will not cause emissions. So they will be helpful in that sense. And also, if they are remotely operated, since there won't be the pressure of humans on board who are trying to reach their homes, these vessels can navigate slower, and therefore they will cause less emissions. Ladies and gentlemen, marine industry, maritime industry in our day is very much interested in science, technology, engineering, and math-related qualifications. So it is only advisable and it is only prudent to train our seafarers with these skills so that they can get their basics, so that they can be relevant and they can keep up to date in the future, especially for deck officers, ship engineer officers, and cargo handlers. Another important element which is topical at the IMO to be considered is the maritime single window. As of this year, January, maritime single window has become mandatory, and the exchange of information for arrival, stay, and departure is being done through a single digital tool. And obviously, this requires digital proficiency because cargo manifests, crew lists, ship certificates will be electronic, and enhanced communication skills between the ship and the port coastal authorities, and also data protection and cybersecurity awareness. In light of what we have discussed, ladies and gentlemen, I think there is a demand or there is a pressing need to update our curriculums, our syllabus, to involve digital and soft skill trainings, to modernize our curriculums, and while doing this, we need to involve all relevant stakeholders, the industry as well, the regulatory approach, so that we can have more comprehensive understanding of what our seafarers will need in the future. And more significantly, we need to accommodate emerging issues. In fact, although IMO International Maritime Law Institute is there to train lawyers, even we had felt this need, and we have recently started amending our syllabus to include maritime autonomous surface ships, digitalization, maritime single window, and also as well as some other developments like high seas treaty, sea level rise, in order to address emerging technological and geographical changes and climate change. And lastly, I think that's, I need to conclude. Lastly, I think it will be only befitting to mention the role of IMO International Maritime Law Institute in capacity building in the context of Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, we take great pride that we are in service to the continent since our establishment in 1988. Up until now, we had 400 graduates from African countries. Only from Tanzania we have 20 graduates, and this year we have 4 students studying at IMLI. And I'm also happy to note that in our governing boards, we have African representatives. In our faculty and administrative staff, we have colleagues from this continent. On that note, I would like to conclude my presentation, and I look forward to our discussion. Thank you all for your attention. Asante sana.
Thank you very much, Dr. Soma. You raised a number of issues which I think the panelists will have to deal with. Well, before we go into the panel discussion, we have one more presentation, and that presentation will be coming shortly, and I'll be calling on our presenter, who is already on the podium, to come forward for his presentation. Mr. Michael Mbaru, Assistant Director, Marine Environment Control, Kenya Maritime Authority. He'll be talking to us about a call to action that's on just and equitable transition for African seafarers. Michael, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you so much. And I'm so grateful to be part of this conversation. Most of you who know me, they know me from Kenya Maritime Authority as a Deputy Director, Marine Environment Protection. But also today, I stand here on a second hat as a climate champion from the Climate Champions team. And in that regard, I am a Maritime Associate for Africa. So indeed, humans are not going anywhere, but of course, we need to take some specific actions, deliberate actions, for us also to take advantage of the transition that is happening. So today I will present on those specific actions that were agreed from some stakeholders consultations that were done mostly involving industry players, recruitment agencies, employers in the maritime sector, trainers in the maritime sector. And together, collectively, they came up with a call to action to these specific industry players for them to take in order to take advantage of this transition. A lot has been said about what's going on at the IMO. Last year, 2023, IMO adopted the GHG strategy that provides a sort of a framework for the IMO to arrive at zero or thereabout by 2050. So to achieve this GHG strategy, shipping must transition away from the conventional fuels towards zero or near zero GHG emissions technologies and fuels. But also as we transition, what does this mean to the men and women that work on board these ships? We've been told already that there are safety issues that needs to be addressed when these new fuels are coming on board. So the question will be, are our African seafarers ready to transition to these new ships that are propelled by hydrogen, ammonia, methanol? So I'll speak to the issues as outline. First of all, I'll give a background of the climate champions, and then take you through the process that led to this call to action. So the climate champions team, as you can see, is a team that supports the UN climate change high-level champions that are always elected during the COPs to mobilize key stakeholders across sectors to amplify global climate action, fostering innovative solutions for a sustainable, low-carbon future. And we do this by driving ambitious initiatives and partnerships to combat climate change. So then, as we go to the just transition, the question is, what is a just transition? So from ILO, that's International Labour Organization, a just transition is a people-centered response to addressing the climate crisis. And it means basically greening the economy in a way that is as fair and inclusive as possible to everyone concerned. So, of course, creating decent work and opportunities without leaving anyone behind. So we need to do this through effective social dialogues and also respect for fundamental labor rights. So as I said, that there's a lot ongoing as we transition to zero or near zero carbon emissions by 2050. So what does this mean to our African seafarers? Well, it can mean two things from my perspective. One, we've told not to be worried by these new technologies by the previous speaker. But also, there's a level of worry that we should have. And second, it means new opportunities and level playing field for our African seafarers. As of now, there's still uncertainty of the fuel that we'll be using. So we are on the same level. So for us to take advantage, we need also to be trained on these new fuels to be able to work in these new sectors that are emerging from the transition. So we are seeing from studies that for us to achieve this transition, there are a number of actions that we need to do. And some of the studies speak to around 450,000 seafarers that need to be retrained and upskilled by 2030 for us now to be able to work in these new vessels that will be propelled by new fuels, that will have new technologies on board. And by mid-2030s, when now we are getting to certainty of the fuels, certainty of the technologies, 800,000 seafarers should have been retrained and upskilled to work in these new vessels. And Africa reportedly accounts for around 78,000 of the global seafarer. So let's speak to these 78,000 seafarers. Will they be ready to work in these new fuels? By 2030, will they have been retrained? Will they have been upskilled? Or they will be transitioned not into the maritime sector, but jobless at home? So issues to do with job insecurity, loss of livelihoods are issues of concern, and the ability to pay for skills upgrade are issues that we should think about, we should talk about, and we should provide solutions for them. So there already work that is ongoing regarding how to transition these seafarers. And during the Conference of Parties, COP26, a Maritime Just Transition Task Force was formed to ensure that shipping response to the climate emergency puts seafarer and community at the heart of the solution. And this task force came up with a 10 action point on how we should, or what actions we should take to transition the seafarers. But what is that challenge that we face? As I've already alluded to it, 800 seafarers may require new skills and additional by 2030 to handle alternative fuels, for example. And also, transitioning to decarbonized shipping will require additional training to hundreds of thousands of seafarers up to 2050. So, as you can see from the scenarios presented, that we will need, as I said, thousands of seafarers to be equipped with knowledge and skills that will facilitate them to work in the new vessels that we are coming up with. So, training also seafarers to support shipping decarbonization is already subject to so many constraints. For example, slow regulatory development, making investments in seafarer training challenge. As I already said, at this point, we are not still certain of the fuels, for example. So that already limits to some extent the planning in terms of training these seafarers, the infrastructure that is needed to train these seafarers. But a lot of progress and a lot of research and development is ongoing in this respect. And we have already seen some vessels being propelled by these new fuels on an experimental level. Others are making big headway. I am privileged to have been in a vessel that is propelled by ammonia. So a lot is already happening. There is constraints on the availability of competent trainers. For example, to train the seafarers on these new challenges that we are facing. And also a shortage of experienced seafarers. But to our continent, Africa, As with these conventional fuels, we are already having so many challenges. For example, having to put our cadets in a training ship, for example, is a major, major challenge for most of our African countries. The high cost of training, these maritime causes and so forth, is already a challenge to our continent. But also, the research and development into these new fuels, new technology, is outpacing the training of the new skills to these seafarers so fast. And that we also need to do catch up in terms of developing the necessary infrastructure to train these seafarers. For example, it takes up to, let's say, 3 years to build a zero-emission vessel. But it takes at least 10 years to become a chief engineer equipped to navigate a zero-emission vessel. So you can see that all these scenarios, all these challenges, and the opportunities, there's an immediate need for us to start putting the training infrastructure in place. No matter which fuel or fuels that are favored to decarbonize shipping industry, we will require additional training, additional skills, additional infrastructure. So we need to start now. So despite these uncertainties, there are things we can do today to kickstart seafarer training to support the transition. And this includes investing in the enhancing maritime training establishments, including proper facilities and equipment, as well as fostering competent maritime trainers. So the national government should take deliberate actions to ensure that this is put in place and necessary resources are allocated to transition our seafarers to these new fuels and technology. So safety skills, for example, and competencies, we've heard about this. We've heard about digital skills and competencies, automation skills, etc. Sustainability skills, all will be required in this transition. So our government should take the necessary steps and urgently to, for example, revise and establish standards and training requirements for alternative fuel types. And this may be through taking necessary amendments to the STCW Convention at the IMO. So, as the Maritime Just Transition Task Force has a plan, as I've mentioned to you, and the plan is to establish consensus to unlock training for the African seafarers, to unlock the investments needed to equip the maritime workforce with the essential skills necessary for a decarbonized shipping industry, and urgently establish global consensus or an ambition to decarbonizing shipping. So these are some of the 10-point action plan that the Maritime Just Transition Task Force has come up with, which of course are fundamental just transition principles that we should consider as we transition the African seafarer. So, is the African seafarer prepared for a decarbonized shipping industry? And this question was answered through the actions that were proposed as we consulted different stakeholders. And we had a number of stakeholders that heeded to these consultations and gave their suggestions and opinions and actions that need to be taken to transition the African seafarers. So, together with the Climate Champions team, we convened a number of stakeholders in the training, certification, employment, and welfare of African seafarers. And these stakeholders conducted a stocktake of the preparedness of African seafarers for the shipping energy transition, and also reviewed the Maritime Just Transition Task Force 10-point action plan. And this is the conclusion that they made, that without concrete action, many African seafarers will not receive the new skills and additional training required to safely handle the new fuels and technologies on board zero-emission vessels, and will not only have a health and safety challenge, but also be a risk of being unemployable in a decarbonized shipping sector. So this is basically what they foresee if we are not taking any urgent and deliberate action. So they came up with key actions for governments, for employers, for industry to take in order to transition the African seafarers. Some of the actions that were recommended for governments, regulators, and policymakers, for example, was to invest in seafarer training institutions equipped with the appropriate training infrastructure. The government also need to adopt clear and targeted policies so that Africa can become a dominant supplier of qualified seafarers global. And we have that opportunity. As I said, this is a level playing field. You know? We still have an opportunity to also train our seafarers on the new fuels, new technologies, and supply this labor globally. Some of the actions recommended was also that African flag ships to offer sea time to African cadets and to prioritize the employment of African seafarers. And also develop campaigns to attract African youth and especially women to careers in maritime. And also promote STEM to support the future generation of seafarers. And to the maritime training institutions, the recommendations of the call to action was to foster the training of competent trainers, enter into collaborations and partnerships with industry to create more opportunities for familiarization on board ships and employment of seafarers. Develop curriculum that reflect the demands of today's shipping industry that is transitioning towards zero and near zero GHG emission fuels, and also to include business and other soft skills in the seafaring training that may be transferable to a career after seafaring. And the key actions for the industry was to allocate funds for the upskilling and retraining of already qualified seafarers, train them on the new technologies, train them on the new fuels that are coming up, and to give preference to African seafarers, particularly women. Also involve seafarers in decarbonization planning and get seafarer buy-in for these plans. Support training institutions, scale up and de-risk zero-emission fuels and technologies for adoption, and also to provide mentorship and internship opportunities for Africa's youths to expose them to various maritime career options. So basically, this is the call to action that was agreed by several stakeholders in the industry. And I call upon you to embrace this call to action and together to continue transitioning our African seafarers. Also to note that this call to action was officially launched at COP29 just the other week and was supported by various organizations, industry, academia, seafarers union, state actors, IGOs, and also primary funders. And we continue to get support from different institutions. Just to mention a recent one is ISWAN, which has expressed its interest to support the transitioning of African seafarers and also to support AMA in transitioning these seafarers. So we still are getting strategic partners that are ready to assist Africa to transition its seafarers. Thank you so much for your attention. Just to add that I have my colleague on the panel and will be able to unpack further this call to action. Maria is on the panel. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Mbaru, for your thought-provoking presentation. Now, a number of issues has been teased out for discussion by the panelists, and I'm certain that our panelists are now ready to do justice to the questions. But let me just recap on what I think I was hearing from the presentations. There will be shortage of trained seafarers. About 150,000 by 2030, and almost 800,000 shortage by the middle of the 2030s. That autonomous shipping is not going to create unemployment, rather to create ample opportunities to really employ our teeming population especially our very young population in Africa. That there are roadmaps that are being fashioned out, that are being put in place by various stakeholders to make sure no one is left behind. And that there are various new roles that will emerge as a result of decarbonization and digitalization, including roles that will arise from the maritime single window implementation for for trade facilitation. I also hear that our seafarers, that they are aging, and there will be other opportunities for either retraining them or replacing them along the line. I will now turn over to the panelists, and I'll be asking them, I'll be putting questions to them for them to basically do justice to those questions. I will start with just a minute. I'm trying to get my computer back in shape. Okay. Mr. Ivan Nitrajan is joining us remotely, but I'm not sure he's online. So I'll move on to Dr. Tumaini Guromo. Dr. Tumaini is director of Dar es Salaam Maritime Training Institute here in Tanzania. She will speak on the topic, what are the capacity development priorities for the region that can be included in the IMO Technical Cooperation Program. Dr. Tumaini, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a number of issues to look at. As we have seen the need for capacity building in the recent developments in the world, especially digitalization, alternative fuel for ships, that goes with decarbonization, robotics, sometimes we talk about. Now, I find it necessary that we now look at more skills development courses or trainings in the IMO capacity building projects. Why do I say that? I look at when we talk about this maritime education and training, especially seafaring and ships, and all the developments, we're looking at hands-on practices. But most of the time we look at the trainings that are provided, we see it's more of the law side of it. But I think it's time that now we look at more technical part of it in our training or capacity building in this region. That is what we mostly lack. And that should go hand in hand with capacitating local institutions. It should not only be coming from trainers, coming from IMO programs. I think it should now come to capacitating local training institutions so that they may also be able to do justice to, to train more I think that is the way to train more. Because right now, we have just a number of trainers that can train, especially when it comes to hands-on practice. So, as for me, what I think is, it is time that we look at hands-on training, but it has to start with training of trainers. And that one also should be hands-on. And if we do that, we go back to training facilities as well. We can be training few people on a number of aspects of digitalization, alternative fuel, and all that. But if we do not have the required technology within Africa, if we do not have the required simulations that we need for training, then this training will not be good enough. Because that is, I think, the problem or the challenge that we are facing in Africa and in our institutions. And that goes back to even to the issue of lacking of sea service training. We need sea service training, but we do not have ships for that training. So it should not only be on the desk training. We need to have proper ships for training. We need to have simulators. We need to have all the facilities that are required for this training, so that this training that is provided by IMO would capacitate few people who would then come back to their institutions or come back to Africa and duplicate the knowledge that they have received. And it will be even better when you have all the facilities. Even when the trainers come, they train you on hands-on. They train the trainers the hands-on, and then it will be even better for them to duplicate that to the students. I find that there is more interest in our young people. I'm taking an example of Tanzania. We have more young people interested in going to sea. It might be different from other parts of the world, but if we have them, and they are like more than half, almost half of the population of this country, is those people, young people who can be, who can work on board. Now, that is why I see there is a need to have that kind of training, so that we will not be short of training or the required training in the world of shipping. Now, is my minutes gone or?
Almost.
Almost gone. Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. So
Thank you.
that is the perspective that I would look at. We would come up with specific trainings, but generally I think we should trim down or to hands-on practices, the areas that we really need, because as we can see, we are lacking those in Africa. So something has to be done so that we may be able to do it within Africa. Thank you.
Well, I can't hear the clap, please. Thank you. Dr. Tsemani, I think you were able to hit the nail on the head. We have able people, our young population are willing to go to sea, but even when you train them, we don't have ships to give them the onboard experience. On this note, I'll now move on to the next panelist, who is going to join us online, Mr. Ivan Natarajan. He's a senior manager at Couriering and Training, International Chambers of Shipping. And he will be speaking to the topic, what skills are needed for the future maritime workforce? Dr. Arvin, over to you. Good. Go ahead.
Very closely associated with Africa. Our Liberian, Nigerian, and Ghanaian members are very important and essential stakeholders. And ICS is also a founder of the Maritime Just Transition Initiative. I must thank Dr. Murad and Michael Merv for explaining many of the points that we have highlighted in earlier forums. As one of the world's biggest growth markets with 1.3 billion people and a combined GDP of $3.5 trillion, Africa should reap some of the rewards of shipping's green transition. Africa has the opportunity to step up and help provide the world with quality seafarers, trained with the skills needed for the future. I can also say with conviction that there is massive potential for a future global center of maritime excellence in seafarer training to be based in Africa, bringing with it more jobs and wider benefits for this region. Sir, to answer your question about skills that is needed for future maritime workforce, this is a discussion that is ongoing at IMO. Everyone acknowledges that the seafarer of today is very different from when I started my career or even from 10 years ago. And I was very glad to hear the Honorable IMO Secretary General reference the fact that the human element is one of the key aspects that has to be considered. The challenge we are having now is to think of skills for the future seafarer of 2030, 2040, or even beyond that. So off the top of my head, I can broadly say that the future African maritime workforce will need a combination of traditional seafaring skills and also new skills to meet with the demands of a decarbonized maritime industry. All the discussions that we are having at so many different forums is very much centered on technical skills such as digital, automation skills, STEM skills, which Dr. Murad mentioned, and also softer skills like organization management. To make our industry attractive, we also need to equip our seafarers with the ability to transition from a sea-based on-board role to a shore-based role, especially after a long career working on ships. I believe that African seafarers have a daunting set of obstacles. Emerging decarbonization technologies and the skills that I mentioned are not available for training purposes, leaving African seafarers not so well prepared for future industry demands. Another compounding factor, especially from a ship owner's point of view, is that there is a high likelihood for Africa to be the next global leader in seafarer supply if and only if there is an assured supply chain of qualified seafarers. This can only happen if there is sufficient investment in training centers and a substantial increase in awareness campaigns to make the seafaring profession attractive. So to summarize, I think that the way ahead for Africa's seafaring workforce is heavy investment in training institutes that can impart digital, automation, STEM skills, but also the soft skills that will enable a career progression from on-board roles to ashore-based roles. And I think that an awareness campaign to promote the maritime, a career in the maritime industry is very urgently required. So thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Arvind Natrajan, who is the Senior Manager at ICS. That's the International Chamber of Shipping. From what you can hear from his presentation, he represents over 50% of the world ship owners, his organization, ICS. And he's challenged us today that Africa can be a global leader in the supply of seafarers if we can get our training right. On this note, I'll call on the next speaker, who is going to basically speak to us on what are the barriers in recruiting African seafarers. I'll be calling on Ms. Malvade Nkalinchana. She's the head of Stakeholder and Advocacy Department, South Africa International Maritime Institute, SAIMI. Ms. Malwande, over to you.
Good afternoon. Okay, that's fine. Good afternoon to all the honorable delegates, and good afternoon to you, moderator. Thanks for this opportunity, and maybe let me start by clarifying that I'm not Mr. Malwande Ngalichana, as indicated in the program. My name is Mrs. Nondumi Somfenyan, and I head skills education, training and capacity development at the institution of South African International Maritime Institution. Thanks for that question, moderator. And listening to the two presenters, it made me to think that we have a lot at stake as it stands. And time is against us, and time is of the essence. And it requires definitely, ma'am, all hands on deck. It requires collaboration. I think the issues of having to look at individual challenges, we're talking about an industry that is global. We're talking about an industry that requires competency that can be able for us to ensure that we sell our seafarers at the global space. There are a number of issues that have been highlighted, which I fully concur, especially with the panel members. The issues of having infrastructure and resources. And some of our countries here in Africa, they don't have enough vessels on our register. And it's something that we need to think of in us, making sure that we do have the necessary capacity and resources, and in doing so, those resources need to be in alignment with the narrative that now we are moving towards autonomous ships. In most cases, Africans import aging fleet, and if we're talking, and I think one of the presenters did highlight the fact that it takes at least 6 years to build a new vessel. And in my mind, I'm thinking the one barrier that in us thinking of having those autonomous vessels, that what do we do with the current skill that we have? And for seafarers, time is of the essence. So if those seafarers that are currently or have been trained traditionally are awaiting the availability of the autonomous vessels, it may even take them to retirement and not even being able to go to sea if, those vessels get to be there by the time they are available for them to be reskilled and retrained. Hence, my opening remarks were time is of the essence. So we are all here and we are all wanting to make sure that Africa become this center of excellence for our seafarers, and making sure that we capacitate competent and sustainable seafarers, and making sure that our seafarers, for an example, we do have a database. We have established a database of seafarers in South Africa. And indeed, my colleague has indicated the issue of and the challenges with the availability of berths. And I think it's one critical area that we need to look into. If we're now looking at these decarbonized vessels, we still have a backlog of those that have not even been exposed to the traditional vessels. So we just need to check in our pursuit of reskilling and recapacitating, where are we in terms of the skilled ones? Have they gotten any exposure to be on board in any of the traditional vessels, and if we need to take them aboard the autonomous vessels? So those are the kind of things. And I think the previous panel member online touched on a very important barrier, which our African seafarers have even struggled on, the issue of soft skills, the issue of attitude in foreign vessels, those who have been got an opportunity to be exposed. So the soft skills, it's one critical thing that in us re-looking into the curriculum, it becomes integrated, and making sure that it becomes our competitive advantage, that anyone around the world will say they want the African seafarers because they are all-rounders. They have an integrated approach to being at sea. They have the technical expertise, and they also have the soft skills with them. I'm not sure how much time do I still have, Chairperson? Must I continue?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think the other element is the issue of the African countries having to be on the IMO white list. We have countries that are not on the IMO white list, and it becomes a challenge for those countries who have to be trained, to have seafarers who needs to be trained, because they have to rely on the countries that have the white list accreditation. So I think it is the responsibility for all of us, and not only coastal countries but also inland, because if we're talking trade, we're talking both coastal and inland seafarers, because we cannot be excluding those who are landlocked just because they don't have the ocean around them. So it has to be, we have to think broadly, and making sure that we support and enable them to be part of the IMO whitelist. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. I can't hear the clap, please. Thank you, Mrs. Nkali-Shana. I'm sorry that we misspelled your title. Sorry about that. Thank you for your intervention. I had a few things from what you said. Time is of essence. All hands should be on deck. And we need to really pay close attention to reskilling our workforce. On this note, I would now like to turn to my friend, Dr. Anish Haber. He's an associate professor at the World Maritime University. Dr. Haber will speak to us on the need for future maritime workforce and how African countries can enhance their maritime training programs. Dr. Anish, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. First of all, thank you, Chair, for giving this opportunity. I was not walking away from the stage. I was coming towards the podium. I take the liberty of making a presentation because, as we all know, one picture says 1,000 words, and I have many words to say. So, I've been given a very complex question. It's easier to say what, and what. And I believe it's much more difficult to then answer the next question, how. So we heard about mass, we heard about decarbonization, and so on and so forth. And I've been given the challenge to do how. And I think some of these elements have already been expressed in the other presentations and discussions, but maybe I do it in a bit more structured way. And perhaps it looks very simple on this slide. How should we do it? There are 3 simple steps. First and foremost, we need to know where do we stand today in maritime education and training, and in short, we use MET. The next step is, where do we want to be in the future? And of course, the future has already been discussed in terms of digitalization, mass, decarbonization, and so forth. If we know where we are and if we know where we want to be, then it's just a matter of drawing this line and charting our roadmaps. So step 1, where do we stand today? Some elements have been discussed, but if you think of it in a structured way, there are 3 core issues to having a professionally well-trained seafarer. There is the curriculum aspect, then there are the methods to deliver this on this curriculum, and also do the assessment, because finally you're looking at assessments, and then you need standards to achieve these assessments and certification of seafarers. And last but not the least, you need to have resources. When we think of curriculum, the contents of the curriculum have been discussed in the different presentations. And as we all know, if we are in the business of maritime education and training, continuously updating the curriculum is our core responsibility. And then, thereafter, we think of what are the methods to deliver this updated, continuously updated curriculum, and then whether we have the appropriate and suitable resources and adequate resources to deliver on this. So, there are some frequently occurring issues, and you hear them all the time. I also have some graphs. The bar graph, as you see over here, this comes from EMSA. You are aware, some of you, maybe having undergone through these EMSA audits. So an audit is a very important aspect of standards. And here you see these issues coming up again and again. And we will not go deep into it because they have been discussed. Then you see the other graph over there. That is very interesting. When you think of the structure of your training institutions, you can have the academicians on one side who have never been to sea, and then you can have the seafarers, like you have the DMI stall over here. So you have the former masters, former chief engineers who are now, as a shore job, when they have come ashore, they are in the business of training. So this graph, as you can see over here, it differs from country to country and differs from institution to institution. So the question is, of course, I'm training certain number of seafarers. Let's say 100 seafarers are passing out through my institution. How many of them are coming back to the institution or coming back to the country? That is one of the challenges which is possibly not discussed here. So that is also an important point to keep in mind, and you can see it in this graph over here. Step 2, I will not go further. In fact, there is one recent report which is launched by Moesna, and if you want to read more about the issues for Africa in general, you will find them in that particular one, and I will come to the end of in the presentation. So what are our goals for the future? Now this is very important, and this starts from our introductory session this morning. All of us are very much aware, and we need not dwell further. We have to understand that maritime education and training leads to maritime development. And then there is maritime-led development, which means the country as a whole and the region as a whole gets developed because shipping or maritime is at the core of our development. So this is a very important aspect to understand, and this goes all the way to the political level, at the highest political level. If that is missing, if the political level does not see the interest or the importance of the maritime, then everything is lost. So this is one of the perspectives. Quality standards, there are many different ways to do it. There is the ISO standards and others. So this is also at the heart of the maritime education and training system. So how are we achieving quality? And quality includes resources. Quality includes continuous assessment to see what we are doing. And you need KPIs for that. So this is another important aspect. And of course, what do we do with that? One more thing which has possibly not been touched on is, of course, the traditional way to do it was in the classrooms. But now, more and more, we are moving on to the online platforms or e-learning. And when we say e-learning, it's not only the seafarers, it's not only the recipients of the training, but it is also those who are going to train the seafarers. So then you have to think of the qualities and the requirements on both sides, the instructor side and the seafarer side. There is another very interesting approach. This can be applied in safety, and this can also be applied in training. So what's the goal we are trying to reach as far as the learning process is concerned? So this looks more at the process. And the process goes all the way back. It starts at the recruitment. Do we have any standards for recruitment? Or do we open our doors for anyone? Oh, please welcome. We have a seat for you here. Because some countries, for example, there can be very competitive exams. 1 million may apply and only 100 may get through. You know? For example, the institution where I did my PhD, when I walked in, there was an entrance exam, and there were thousands of them. And finally, when I joined the institution, there were only 5 in the school. So the rest could not qualify. So that's the start. So whatever is the input, that will be the output. So when I think of a qualified and very professional seafarer, I also need to think of the input. So this is part of the goal-based process to learning. Another important aspect which we need to highlight is continuous involvement of the state. And I will show you an example why this is very important. So here, there are different loops. So you have the state in the center, you have the industry on one side, and then you have the other institutions, etc. on one side. So the seafarer training institutions. So these are working in causal and continuous loops. And some of them are positively affecting and some of them are negatively impacting. So it's inversely proportional. So the minus sign is inversely proportional. So, for example, when there was the COVID or when there is a downturn, economic downturn, so that has an impact on shipping. So this continuous association of the state is a very important aspect which we need to keep in mind. So it's not one time. We have the AIM strategy, we have the report or whatever. So it's a continuous involvement. So that brings us to the last step. How do we achieve our goals for maritime education and training? So I have 10 points over here. You can see them. Establish and strengthen. This is one of the foremost. Do we lack training institutions in Africa? I believe not. There is an abundance of training institutions. But then we need laboratories. We need workshops. We need simulators. We heard about the full mission simulator which has been recently acquired by DMI. The next point is collaboration and cooperation. They go hand in hand. So these are very important aspects. And we have heard some examples since the morning. And I have some more on the slide which you can read in your own time. MOUs. I'm aware very recently, for example, Tanzania has acquired some MOUs and with Barbados, if I'm not mistaken. And there will be a huge number of seafarers who will have opportunities for training on board Barbados flagships. So that also brings us to training berths, which you can see over here. So this is a very important aspect. And I would say this is not unique to Africa. In many parts of the world, you can have the institutes working in isolation, churning out seafarers, and when they have finished their training within the institute, there are not enough berths available. So this is where the government comes in that causal loop diagram. So the government has to make opportunities, and it's not about Africa, seafarers in Africa. We have to seek MOUs, and I will show you a slide later where the governments could go beyond Africa wherever in the world. And there are many other points, and you have examples. For shortage of time, I will not discuss them further. Technology. This is at the core of a maritime training institution. So, and technology, you can see it comes in various levels. Computer is the most basic, and then you can go internet, you can have multimedia, and all maritime training institutions, they are not at the same level. Some maybe are only producing ratings, some are at the level of the university. So depending on which level you're functioning, you will require different levels of advancements in technology. This is a very structured way of looking at things. So how can we achieve Africa's goals? I took this opportunity to review the African Maritime Transport Charter. And some of you may be looking at it for the first time, or some of you may be dealing it all the time. There is a specific article, Article 8, which deals with MET. And all those 10 points, you'll be surprised, which I showed you on this slide, they all come from the Charter. It's nothing new. So it's looking for examples, and I have a substitute for capacity building. I would like to call it capacity sharing. So it's not about building. So building is somebody coming from outside and trying to do something in Africa. So there is enough in Africa, and I can show you over here. So these are the points which are available in the Charter, Article 8. I produce all of them here. And then there is the Moesna Transport Policy, which was published in June 24. And here again, you find short-term, mid-term, and long-term. It lists all these actions, the same 10 ones, which you can see, and there are 30 different actions under these 3 heads long-term. So, how do we do it? Collaboration. Of course, collaboration can take various forms, and of course, the industry is integral. You have the AMA here, IMO, of course, and when I say World Maritime University, we have the IMLI as well, both IMO institutions. And last but not the least, the WMU alumni. If you see this number, Murad mentioned some number for IMLI, and you see the number over here, more than 1,600. So that's a huge number which has already been trained, and we continue to train. And we have a syllabus, we have a curriculum which is continuously responding. I have met some from Africa who were in amongst the first batches when the World Maritime University was formed. In those days, there were only 2 specializations. Today, we have 7. So we are continuously responding and keeping an eye on the industry and responding with our curriculum, creating new modules, creating new specializations or subspecializations. So this is very important. But the point I would make is, look no further. Look inside Africa. One photograph is already on the stage. But there are others in every country. So we have Nigeria, one of the largest contributors to the World Maritime University, Ghana, Kenya, and so on and so forth. And when you think, how are the candidates coming? Some are being sponsored by the country. Nigeria, why do they have large numbers? They're sponsoring more than 10, 12 every year, and that's why they're there. I'm aware of South Africa, for example, Theta, they make a huge number of contributions. Moesna has in the charter, so have you thought of sending some candidates from Africa? We have MOCA, have you thought of sending some candidates? It's in the charter, it's in the policy, but you have 30 actions. But how does it translate with funding? So that's a question to discuss. I mentioned about the list of METs. They are all at different levels. So capacity sharing. How can we work together? Ghana is, for example, the regional university. So how do we cooperate and collaborate with each other so that as a region we rise? I think that is the interesting question which needs to be discussed and debated. Funding. I think this is at the core if you want to succeed. In university level, how we do it is, of course, we have the IMO, we have our donors, but then we also do a lot of research. So at university levels, you have to do research, so that brings in your funds. And that also keeps you up to date with what is happening in the industry. So you are at par with the latest trends in digitalization or whatever. So the research is also at the core. And then for research, possibly you can think of collaboration. In fact, now we have an example where during our last visit in April, we have started working more closely with the DMI. So the collaboration collectively enhances our level to undertake research and to deliver on the most important aspects. Avenues for governments for enhancing maritime education and training. So establishing forums. I would consider AMA, for example, is a forum. Government-to-government MOUs, so bilateral, multilateral MOUs, not only within Africa, possibly outside Africa as well. Guidelines, so this is very important. Standardization, when you think of standardize, so there is a discussion of having African seafarers on African ships. But are the training institutions where the seafarers are graduating, are they certified? Are they observing the quality standards? If not, the ship owner will refuse to take your seafarer who's coming from an institution within the continent. So quality standards would also be important. Then tripartite agreements and special grants. Special grants are very important, especially when you're looking at, for example, rating level or diploma level and so on and so forth. Yesterday only, when I was looking on the internet, I found a very good example of Met Fund over here in Dar es Salaam Institute. So this is one example, and I put the photograph over there. Last but not the least, this is my last slide. I was hoping that there'll be a lot of discussion, so I just put it as a last slide. So now the focus is more on climate. So climate investment for maritime education and training. And of course, at the World Maritime University, we have a special course which deals with energy management. So with this, I'm done. Thank you very much.
I was going to let Dr. Anish just continue and go on, but time is of essence. But there are a few takeaways here. When he was making his presentation, he talked about capacity sharing. That in Africa, we already have this capacity. We should look within. And it was evident today, during the photo session, the number of WMU and IMLI alumni in this room. We should look within. We should share capacity. Dr. Anish also mentioned about MOUs. Now, if I go on and on, I can just continue, but the presentation will be available to all of us immediately after this conference. So you'll have all the materials for your reference purpose. So thank you very much, the speakers. I have one more speaker to go, and I'll be calling on our last speaker. I know she's already prepared and looking at me and wondering whether I'm going to give her airtime or not. I will. Miss Maria Ogbogo. Maria is a maritime associate practitioner for Africa. She's a climate champion, a member of the Climate Champions team. She'll be talking to us on what partnerships are required to build capacity. Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and good afternoon to you all. I'd like to start, before I respond, I'd like to paraphrase a quote that I like to repeat as often as I can. It's a quotation that is attributed to an old English explorer named Sir Walter Raleigh. And he said, "He who rules the sea rules the world." For emphasis, he who rules the sea rules the world. The countries that rule the world today started by ruling the sea. They got on boats, on ships, and traveled across the seas to other lands and conquered. And that is why they rule the world today. In order to rule the world, you need to rule the sea. As maritime administrators, I'd like to encourage you to look at the sea as a way to achieve economic development for Africa. And the seafaring is one of the lowest hanging fruits. We can train seafarers, and that way we can be a global supplier of seafarers. And in this decarbonized era, climate change presents an opportunity for us to seize and at least conquer in seafaring. So what are the partnerships that are required? I'll give you examples of what is already being done so that we can celebrate these and emulate them. I'll give you the example of the Ghana Maritime Authority and the Ghana Education Service, where Ghana Maritime Authority is going around to secondary schools in Ghana and encouraging students to embrace a career in shipping. They are sending teams to the colleges and secondary schools and talking to students about maritime careers. That is encouraging young people who have never even heard about seafaring, who may not have an uncle or auntie who is a seafarer, who will be exposed to the idea of a career in maritime. We need more of those to encourage our students. Another example I'll give you is of the Regional Maritime University and Hafnia. Hafnia is a ship owner that operates tankers carrying petroleum products. Hafnia and the Regional Maritime University have signed an MOU, in which Hafnia takes 16 cadets each year from the Regional Maritime University and offers them sea time, and then goes on to offer them permanent employment on their ships. So far, I think there's more than 40 cadets that have had the opportunity to have sea time and employment through this partnership between the Regional Maritime University and Hafnia. I like to encourage the training institutions here to reach out to some of these ship owners and shipping lines and make a case for why your cadets should be given these opportunities. And you would be surprised that you'll be embraced and you'll be successful. Another partnership that is essential is among regulators and policymakers. And I'd like to urge our administrators who are here that with climate change and climate action being discussed quite extensively and with the ongoing IMO negotiations, we as Africans should look to these IMO negotiations for sources of finance to provide our regional training institutions with the simulators, with the ships that they need to provide the training. Let's keep our eyes firmly on the IMO negotiations and look to that for funding, climate finance, redistribution of levies. Let us look to that to fund, provide the essential funding that we need for these ships, because there is no reason why each of our training institutions cannot have a training ship, except that it's $20 or $30 million to buy one, and you have to keep it running even though it's not generating any revenue. So funding is a real barrier, and let's use the ongoing IMO negotiations to secure funding for this purpose. So these are the partnerships that I think are essential, and hopefully we can encourage everyone in the room here to find ways to replicate some of these. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. I think you nailed it all. It's important to play a very vital role in shipping. Africa can supply all the seafarers the world will need in the foreseeable future to replace an aging population if we get our trainings right. And funding, there are so many ways of getting around that. Now, throughout the session, I was taking notes. But if I were to go through my notes, it would take another 10 to 15 minutes. So I'll sum it up in 3 ways. Firstly, my first summing up will be a call to the training institutions. The general consensus is that there's a need to align curricula with future trends, emphasizing adaptability and innovation. The second call, which resonated in all the presentation, was the political will. A call to policymakers to create regulatory framework that encourage investment in sustainable and technological advancements that will make our seafarers able to be relevant in the shipping industry. And to our industry leaders, there's most of them in the room, most of you are here, the commitment of resources to training partnership, focusing on innovation, diversity, and inclusion. We can do capacity sharing. We don't have to build capacity all the time. And on that note, I have to thank the presenters. You've done an excellent job. I asked for 2, I got 3. I'm a lucky man. To my panelists, you are simply beautiful. We managed to achieve proper gender balance on this panel. It's unfortunate my Secretary General is not here to see how well we've done. We have only 2% women seafarers. Today, we achieved almost a 50-50 balance on the stage. So please give the panelists a round of applause. Thank you very much. Thank you.
May I call for a photo? Let me take you back to the center and please stand in the middle. So can we put our hands together to the panel that's just ended And to the panel that's coming. The final one for the day. It's been a long one, eh? Thank you for your patience. And we move to a panel I hope that will be a panel that I believe will be vigorous this evening. If you feel like standing up a little bit and stretching, please do so. All right? If you've sat down for too long. So, according to the program, I have the moderator as the Honorable John Omingo. Chair Planning Committee, AMA, and alternate permanent representative, Kenya to IMO. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together to our moderator who will take us to the end of the day. So my instructions are to keep us wide awake. Okay. Good luck with that. Huh? Thank you. All right, karibu.
Good evening. Hey, it's evening. Good evening. I need the luck because coming at this particular point in time, when I'm between you and your cocktail, and those who also want to refresh is a tall order, but we'll manage. Do you know why we'll manage it? Because the last topic is about money, and I'm sure money interests everybody. Now, for purposes of those who may be tired, and I've sat down since morning and I've been keenly listening, please just turn your head on the right-hand side and look at the person seated next to you, whether you are very, very familiar with him or her, or you are seeing him or her for the first time. Yeah. I see. You are quite familiar. So, thank you, Vincent. I've got a very interesting theme. The theme that we are going to do and end the day with is financing sustainable maritime transport in Africa. It's talking about money. And we welcome you to this theme. Africa is vast with a very long coast. It is a very big continent, which is lucky enough to be an island. And when you have an island, it means that you can go all around it. And as big as it is, it needs a lot of integration within the continent to be able to have people trade with one another. So maritime is very critical because it links countries in Africa with each other, but it also opens Africa to the global market. So it is very, very important. And as many of you are aware, it costs money, serious money. The infrastructure you need to build, the ports, you need to build the rail and the road networks, it costs money. And this money, national governments have tried, but many a times international support institutions are also there, and they have given us a lot of support in this respect. And as a continent, Africa is attracting a lot of interest in terms of developing the infrastructure needed. And the maritime is king. It is what will open it up. We have seen Africa Finance Corporation, over $11 billion US, energy, transport, and many other sectors. We have seen the Chinese investments. We have seen the World Bank, the African Development Bank, who is going to speak to us, has really given us a lot of support in terms of the infrastructure development in ports and many other areas. European Union, we have the World Bank, and many other institutions. So there is a lot of growing interest in supporting infrastructure development in Africa. Now, given the diverse sources of international funding, how then do we build the financial literacy and capability of the administrators to effectively engage with investors and donors in securing financing? And what training programs do they need to be able to talk and oversee big projects that are taking place in Africa? Now, today, you will be made aware of the diverse and sustainable financing frameworks that could support development of Africa's maritime sector. We are privileged to have with us on board here people from financing institutions who will share ways of reaching out and accelerating financing for the maritime sector projects in Africa. Allow me at this particular point in time to call their names. We have 3 presentations. The first presenter will be none other than James Nganga from the African Development Bank. James, can you start walking? Kwa mwendo ya haste, if I can speak in French, and quickly come in front. This is the last session, so please try not to pray for us. Prayers are gone. Prayers took place immediately after lunch. Now lunch is gone. Just be alert because we are talking about money. James, come in. James is the principal Ports and Maritime Transport Officer at the African Development Bank in Abidjan. He's going to make a presentation on opportunities for financing sustainable maritime transport, including green fuel production in Africa. The second presenter will be Helen Dalali, the head of Sustainability, Department of Blue Economy Financing of the Equity Bank, based here in Tanzania, but is working all over the continent in terms of financing. She's working like somebody with serious money. And being a person with serious money, she's going to talk to us about public and private financing mechanisms for maritime infrastructure in Africa. And then Vincent Job, who has been working together with me, will bring the IMO aspects of financing, not just financing, but maritime development and partnerships in Africa. So if you didn't hear him very well, you will hear his voice again, but this time not as a moderator, but as a presenter, because there are very important things that they needed to do for us. Then after they have done their presentations, it's going to be very short but sweet, because we don't have time. So it will be very, very fast. And it will be good for those ones who are very keen, because they'll be moving at a very, very high speed. But we have to take up everything. Then with them, among the presentations, we also have panelists. We have Hailo Humphrey Kibiki, not Kibaki, Kibiki. We had a Kibaki, it's a cousin to Kibaki of Kenya. Humphrey Kibiki. Humphrey Kibiki is a manager, sustainable finance monitoring. He'll be one of the panelists and evaluation at CRDB Bank. He's a certified expert in sustainable finance covering green climate fund, adaptation, mitigation, as well as climate finance resource mobilization. So all the monies that Harry of IMO is dealing with in terms of living in the shipping and all these ones, this gentleman will mobilize them and make them available. He just show us how he's going to do that. Then we have Dr. Anthony Ekundayo Moberiola. Is he here? I don't know whether I got your name very well, Dr. Is he here? He was supposed to join us, Dr. Anthony, the Director General of NIMASA. Ah, there he is. Dr. In our language, we call you Dr. But in English, it is Doctor. Dr. Anthony Ekundayo Moberiola is the Director General of NIMASA. NIMASA is the TASAC of Tanzania, the KMA of Kenya, and this is now the NIMASA of Nigeria. He will also share with us a lot of discussions in a number of areas that I'm going to introduce. Karibu, karibu. Then we have Mr. Baher El Ifnawi. I hope he's in the room so that he doesn't contradict the way I pronounce his name. Is he in the room? Is he? Mr. Baher Ifnawi? Oh, it's not here, but we have Dr. Jovin. Dr. Jovin is a good friend of mine from Trademark, East Africa. Dr. Jovin, I saw him this morning. There you are, there you are. There you are. Okay. Okay. I'm told that Baher was listening to me, but you could not see him. But you will see him online. He's going to make his presentations online. Then we have Mr. Chui Sifei, Director, International Cooperation of China. He's also supposed to be listening now, and he will come online. I hope he's available somewhere watching us as we proceed on with this. So then, ladies and gentlemen, I look forward to an insightful exchange that will emerge from this session we are having. And please join me in welcoming the distinguished panelists and the presenters with a very big round of clap. And on that note, may I call upon the first presenter, Mr. James Nganga, to come forward and share with us within a very short time.
John, I may need your help here. John.
Oh, you can't get it? You forwarded.
I've seen it.
Oh.
There's a listing of presentations.
The technical team, could you come and help us quickly? Oh, there it is.
Where? Oh, it's not responding. I had sent mine. Yes. Financing number this one. Yes. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Oops. Is there? I think so. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is James Nganga from the African Development Bank, and the topic that was assigned to me is on opportunities for financial sustainable maritime transport, including green fuel production in Africa. The African Development Bank, as the name says, is a development bank. So I'll be speaking from the context of a development bank, where our mandate is broader than just merely providing financing. We come from a perspective where the initiatives we undertake, both in public and private sector, because we also have lending and activities geared and addressed to the private sector, are aimed at not only providing finance, but capacity building and achieving certain development outcomes. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'll go into my presentation, and I'll start with a contradiction. There are many challenges within our sector, within the continent, when you look at them from a sustainability subject. We do have quite a number of issues from a climate change perspective, from an energy transition perspective. Fortunately, these challenges, in line with our presentation, can be converted into opportunities that can provide certain value addition to our sector, enable our sector to come out as a transformative sector. I will pick one or two, three challenges to illustrate. This sector is characterized by a low level of readiness in terms of green technology. A lot of these green aspects, most of our ports, most of our maritime institutions are not or do not bring out that competency of being ready to actually walk that transition that is required by the 2023 greenhouse gas emissions. We see a lot of capacity challenges, but we also see a lot of opportunities in that. The environment is also characterized by some limitations in awareness, and forums like this are helping to address and facilitate awareness and sensitization and acceptance of what is required. Other aspects is that there are certain barriers in the transition, energy transition, that characterize our environment. But fortunately, coming from a maritime, from a development bank perspective, we see quite a number of opportunities. And here, I'll just highlight a few things that we see in our sector. We do see some key strategies that can help us define our way forward in terms of strategies that can be implemented to facilitate this transition. We see the opportunity to facilitate the introduction of electrification in our ports as a way of getting rid of the fossil fuel equipment or utilizing equipment. We also see opportunities to move to renewable energy, utilization of renewable energy sources within our sector. We also see an opportunity as a sector to facilitate reforms in a coordinated manner at continental level. With all this, we do see an opportunity also for the sector to be able to embrace schemes that would promote and provide incentives for the transition that is required within this sector. As an institution, we are guided by a defined approach that provides and strengthens and recommends the introduction of national action plans in the different countries. And here I take note that I'm addressing an audience of maritime administrators across the continent who are responsible for facilitating and implementing national maritime transport action plans and policies, which could also embrace within their respective pillars activities geared at facilitating sustainability within the sector. These activities include aspects that may be provided within the action plans that would actually identify and provide baseline activities that can be implemented to achieve the transformation that is required. In this particular aspect, as an institution, we are currently working with about 2 or 3 ports to try and see best how we can facilitate the ports to undertake the required development of the strategies to enable them actually incorporate environmental and operational sustainability within their day-to-day activities. We are also exploring, as a bank, the possibility of introducing a ports certification scheme that will enable our ports and maritime sector to embrace and encourage the usage of, or the mainstream IMO mechanisms and procedures that include the 2023 greenhouse gas emissions. So as we do this, we are supported by numerous trust funds. The trust funds facilitate not only financial resources to enable capital investments, but also technical assistance. On the slide that I have before you, I'm able to illustrate a number of funding mechanisms that we have in the bank. The bank relies on trust funds as part of the resource mobilization initiatives to mobilize funding resources to address the funding gap that is there or that is required to support sustainability initiatives within the maritime transport sector. If I may just pick a few to illustrate what I'm trying to bring out, we have the Green Climate Fund, GCF, where the bank is accredited as an implementing partner and is able to utilize or access very low-cost concessioning finance to finance a number of activities geared at promoting sustainability mechanisms, environmental sustainability mechanisms within the ports and maritime sector. We also have the Climate Infrastructure Initiative, which is currently actually live and ongoing, and it will close on the 17th of January, which seeks to provide funds to facilitate zero carbon shipping within the maritime sector. And we've already been able to share the expressions of interest to a number of players, and several players are actually putting together applications, and I'm hoping to use this session today to actually kind of sensitize you on the opportunities available from the Climate Investment Fund initiative. The other initiative that is of significance to all of you is the Canada African Development Fund, Climate Fund, which also provides low-cost financing to interventions within the port sector and the maritime sector to support sustainability mainstreaming in this particular area. And on this particular one, actually, in the last 2 years, we've had the Port of Cotonou benefit from resources from this facility. About $19 million was made available last year in July to the Port of Cotonou as part of a bigger financing program to facilitate the financing of wind power supply or as an alternative power supply to that particular port, and a number of other aspects to facilitate the decarbonization process within the Port of Cotonou. In order to get our message home, one of the requirements of today's session was to actually illustrate the role of international financing institutions in supporting implementation of sustainability in the maritime sector. Given that we are a development bank, one of the key things that we do to support the whole process is working in collaboration with partners and potential borrowers is to facilitate the actual assessment of the climate risk and the climate challenge within the particular port or the initiative, the maritime initiative that we have before us. Once we've done that, then we strategize and work with that institution to actually define what adaptation measures or mitigation measures are required. And in doing so, we have partnered with the Global Center for Adaptation to facilitate that kind of assessment. And then we undertake the assessment, define what is required, and then mobilize resources to finance the required resilience initiative or mitigation initiative. And in doing so, we also provide for building capacity to ensure the sustainability is mainstreamed and enhanced within the particular facility. I'll skip this slide. In terms of opportunities, in the last couple of years, the bank has actually been very, very bullish. In the year 2016, the bank was allocating about 9% of the total lending portfolio to climate finance and climate change issues. And this has moved to about 55%. And in today's activities, we are required to ensure that 40% of the overall funding that we provide to projects goes into sustainability initiatives. And to do this, we have a number of climate risk instruments that we actually tap into or rely on, which this slide illustrates. We have the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program, which we are doing in partnership with the Global Center for Adaptation. We have the Urban and Municipal Development Fund. I'm just picking some examples to illustrate, where when we do initiatives geared at improving our urban cities' interfaces with our port facilities and maritime installations, we ensure we incorporate sustainability components within that overall funding scheme. What will be of importance to you is the climate action window. The climate action window was launched last year, towards the end of last year, and provides currently about $429 million of funding that is geared at supporting climate change, climate mainstreaming, sustainability initiatives in our ports and maritime sector. And here, the fund provides for about 75% of the entire funding into adaptation initiatives, 15% of the funding allocated into mitigation initiatives, and another 15% into, another 10% into technical assistance. Towards the end of 2023, with a closing date of February 24, this fund did run an expressions of interest or a call for proposals for the adaptation component, which was actually heavily subscribed, and there were more applications than the resources that were available. And unfortunately, the maritime industry did not come out very strongly in this particular process, which then brings out and raises questions on the debate that we've had and the sentiments that have been expressed earlier today in terms of that in this whole sustainability agenda, financing is a challenge. From where we stand and from where we sit, this whole sustainability agenda, we have observed the challenge has actually been ability to receive quality proposals, ability to get the partners, the interested players within the sector to submit proposals that can actually communicate the sustainability challenge. I proceed to actually demonstrate the components that will resolve or help to mitigate and provide for adaptation on the sustainability challenge. Fortunately, during COP, the recent COP, this particular window, we did launch a call for proposals for technical assistance initiatives. This will close, it was launched on 13th of November during COP, and it will close on the 5th of February next year. And currently we are working actually with the port authorities in Madagascar and in Kenya to see how best they can prepare appropriate applications. We did circulate through the port management associations, that is PAMESA and PAMWACA. We did circulate the information immediately. This call for proposals was launched on the 13th of November, and the two ports so far have come forward for assistance on how they can package this initiative. So my call here to the maritime administrators today is for them to be able to pick up interest in this particular facility, because this facility is unique in the sense that it not only provides funding for technical assistance in terms of the initiative, but there is also inbuilt, once you meet the eligibility criteria, there is an inbuilt facility within the technical assistance window that will actually provide for a capacity or for resources that will enable you to prepare good applications. And this is where now we need to have some further engagements because once a particular interested party or beneficiary meets the initial eligibility criteria, then there is room for them to be assisted to be able to package whatever is required. So, what we will do is we will share this information also with the AMA Secretariat so that it can be passed on to the wider AMA community. And I don't know how possible it will be on Sunday during the General Assembly for this matter to be discussed, because it's a facility that is available. Unfortunately, just like I said, for the adaptation window, which closed in February, and we did have a preparation workshop for all the successful players in September, the maritime sector was only represented by 2 proposals that went through, which indicates that there is actually a capacity gap in terms of being able to prepare quality proposals, because the whole process was a competitive process where the proposals were evaluated alongside proposals from energy, from agriculture, from other sectors, and ours as a family. And here we have to talk as a family, as a maritime family. Our proposals, the few that came through, many of them did not meet the standards to be pre-qualified to be able to proceed forward. The ones that were pre-qualified to be able to proceed forward was one from the Lake Victoria Basin Commission on promoting inland water transport on Lake Victoria. So As I've said, I will circulate the information to the AMA Secretariat, and I'm hoping that come Sunday, in the General Assembly, I don't know how your agenda is structured, but I'm hoping that in the General Assembly, in line with the sentiments that were brought out by the Secretary General of IMO, on the need to focus on action. Because at the end of the day, we would like maybe come the next AMA meeting to be able to start mapping, a process that will start mapping the countries that are actually tapping into this kind of resources. Sorry that I've spent more than enough time on the climate action window, but it is important because this is a practical facility that is available right now and that would enable us to address some of those challenges that I started with in my earlier slides in terms of capacity building, in terms of readiness, in terms of a high upfront costs, because then this facility will enable the players to be able to package high quality, bankable proposals. Here, I just wanted to highlight and strengthen the discussion I brought out on the partnership we have with the Global Center for Adaptation, which is under the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program. And this is critical for us as a continent because our maritime sector is affected by certain challenges like coastal erosion, rising water levels. So it requires initiatives geared at strengthening flooding in some of the low-lying maritime facilities. So it requires initiatives geared at ensuring that the facilities can be adapted to be green and resilient, utilizing the different options, and also not only the public sector side, but also the climate resilient infrastructure PPPs done and developed by the private sector. So we do have that collaboration with the Global Center for Adaptation, and actually we've deployed this facility in the Gambia during the process of evaluating the 4th Banjul Port Expansion Program. We've deployed this facility in Cotonou when we did the Cotonou port rehabilitation program last year. We are in the process of deploying this facility in the Comoros, where we did have an approval from the Board of Directors in July for the reorganization and the expansion of the Port of Moroni and the Port of Bungoma in the Union of Comoros. So it is a facility that is available. The partnership is a very strong partnership. The only challenge we have is we do not get as many proposals as we would wish to receive to enable us to address the aspect or the climate risk related which requires adaptation measures to be incorporated in. In terms of, I did mention earlier on, in terms of the 40% commitment, in that in the bank's initiatives, we are required to ensure that in all approvals that we get, 40% of the project's components of the overall total funding incorporates aspects to do with climate finance. We do have access to about 25 billion USD in terms of finance resources to be able to support climate finance. And all this is enshrined and supported by the bank's climate change and green growth strategy and its related action, climate change action plan that is in place. So, ladies and gentlemen, resources are there. It is about the quality of the applications, the technical capacity, and there are also equivalent resources to support that particular aspect. We do have a number of benefits that can be derived out of this whole financing opportunities. There has been concerns raised earlier today in the sense that decarbonization, the targets that we have for decarbonization might not be achieved, but with this partnership, we do believe that we can accelerate with the resources we have, the instruments we have, we can accelerate decarbonization. We can also enhance climate resilience. We can also facilitate, actually, and create a whole chain of new kind of jobs, promote green jobs, provide green jobs to the market, and also opportunities to facilitate knowledge sharing, because we are a development bank. So we do have that mandate to provide and facilitate capacity building. So with the early players, the early movers, the ones who've come forward, we will work with them as we also strive to seek and build capacity within the continent so that then we have opportunities for knowledge sharing amongst peer-to-peer colleagues within the continent. With that, I think I've said what I wanted to say, but I need to highlight one or two things in terms of maritime sector financing capacity. We do have a fund that we call MCDF, the Multilateral Center for Development Finance, for which we are an implementing partner, which is based at the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank in Beijing. And we are talking to them. We are looking at a workshop that we will hold with them sometimes in June next year. And this workshop is geared at also building the capacity of the sector to be able to appreciate and go through the process of how they can access the resources that I've talked about and many other resources that we do have in the framework of the development bank that we are. So we will let the AMA Secretariat know, because we are seeking, we will provide a full package in the sense that we are partnering with several other MDBs, but we'll provide a full package in the sense that we will actually not only have a conference on ports, but on the first day, the idea is to have that actual training. So we'll ask the AMA Secretariat to facilitate invitations to the AMA members, as we also work with our traditional partners, that is the Port Management Association of Western Central Africa, as well as the Port Management of Eastern and Southern Africa, to facilitate this. And this whole thing is being informed, this whole initiative is being informed by the fact that the uptake of these instruments that we have, the opportunities that we have, has not been at the pace at which the bank would like it to be. And a good number of these resources, ladies and gentlemen, are actually grant resources. And they are resources to enable the sector be able to uplift its readiness levels, because I think I started with the issue of readiness, so that then bankable, good quality proposals can be prepared. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to me.
Wow. So that is good news. He has given us a lot of food. We were looking for action. Where do we get the actions? Now you've just seen them. I don't want to give a snapshot of what he has said because of time. So I'll just call the next speaker. And once they are done, I'll just be mentioning one or two things about what each and every one of them has said. So then I call upon Madam Helen Dalali to come forward and show us the money.
Thank you, moderator. Where's my presentation? Okay, my name is Helen Dalali. I come from Equity Bank, Tanzania, and my presentation will be based on financing sustainable maritime infrastructure in Africa. And I understand it's already evening, so I will do my best to summarize the presentation in the interest of us all getting to the cocktail on time. A very high-level overview of Equity Bank Group. Equity is a regional group that is operating in 7 countries. That is Kenya, Uganda, South Sudan, Tanzania, Rwanda, and DRC. And it's a regional leader in terms of providing financing and driving socio-economic transformation in the region. So you would see we are already servicing over 9.6 million customers across the continent. And it's very systemic and instrumental in some of the countries that we're operating. And I see that as a very crucial partner for maritime administrators to collaborate with the bank. Obviously, other than the bank itself, we do have some other arms that are providing services. We have our investment bank, our equity foundation that takes care of environmental and social aspects, but also the insurance venture and the technology space, or the technology firm that takes care of technology solutions. Now, the Equity Bank strategy is very much immersed or is delivered through the Africa Recovery and Resilience Plan. And this is a twin engine, and now we've updated it to a 3-engine model, whereby our overall business model is focused on driving integrated financial solutions, but also delivering the social impact and changing lives, but overseeing sustainability and environmental due diligence and transformation. And you'll see we have a number of pillars that we are looking at, and specific targets that the Africa Recovery and Resilience Plan is focused in delivering till 2030. So what is our understanding of the blue and maritime sustainable ecosystem and transport or infrastructure? And here, from a commercial perspective, and you must note, I'm not a maritime expert, but Equity Bank is looking at the 360 ecosystem of the maritime sector. And we're already working very closely with some of the sectorial players in the maritime segment. So we have stakeholders, customers in the fisheries, in the petroleum and shipping, as well as renewable energy, aquaculture, and tourism. And this is to say, we are not only a financing partner, we are also providing end-to-end sustainability transition or decarbonization roadmaps to the customers we are dealing with. In the morning, it was very impressive to hear majority of the speakers and presentations focused on really driving the decarbonization in the sector. So Equity could also support you over and above the financing aspects that we are offering. Okay, so next to the very main point that I wanted to present today are some of the mechanisms that are there in terms of financing. And these are just theoretical, but again, you would again face the commercial bank with specific products that I'll speak about later on. So public-private partnerships are crucial if you want to foster the financing mechanism between the public and the private sector, and some of these have been seen in the port agreements that have been witnessed across the continent. Next is project finance. Our investment bank arm offers project financing, whereby we would finance a specific project, be it an infrastructure development or an improvement of port operations. And now revenues and return of the loans or facilities will be based on this particular project. Next is private and venture capital, whereby now investors, different equity investors would now be able to support the maritime sector in this accord. And more interestingly, the bond issuances. I've even come across maritime bond issuances. Here is another potential areas that maritime administrators could collaborate with banks and other players in issuing bonds, structuring them, getting the technical support in structuring bonds, and ensure that you are able to mobilize funds that could support financing and implementation of initiatives in the maritime sector. So next is public financing, and some of the examples that we have are obviously from the state players. These are governments and grants, just like the previous speaker has pointed out. Development banks and other sectors players are also providing grants to support financing mechanism. His presentation really showed a good example of some of the grant offerings that are there. DFIs, the development partners that we have, the likes of investors that would normally bank with commercial banks, are also readily available to support the maritime sectors. And lastly, hybrid. Here we are looking at blended arrangements where you would arrange the blended financing to ensure that you are reducing the risk of these facilities and combining or syndicating more collaborations to ensure that the financing mechanisms are possible. Key considerations while making these financing decisions are risk mitigations. Now, this sector has a number of risks: geopolitical tensions, security concerns, climate change, productivity and volumes changes. So commercial banks would normally be keen to understand how do we mitigate these risks. So risk mitigation considerations are very key while making financing decisions, and here is where we are looking at probably maybe exploring insurance opportunities or guarantees to ensure that we are leveraging or we are mitigating these risks. Stakeholder alignment and collaborations. We are a global village, so we need to collaborate and work together as partners. And obviously of more interest, sustainability. Championing sustainability is also a very good opportunity to get financing and opportunities in the maritime sector. Now, driving it home, giving live example of what exactly you could benefit as maritime administrators in the banking sector. I'm sharing just a few lending products, two of them, which is asset financing and working capital. And these are practical instruments that could be used by maritime administrators to finance their project, their initiatives or operations. So with asset financing for Equity Bank, we offer financing up to $20 million US dollars. And for working capital, likewise, which is revolving, it's up to 9.5. So from 100,000 to 20 million for asset financing, and for working capital is from 100,000 US dollars to 9.5 million. The tenure now would vary depending on the facility or the ask. And here we are looking at probably a maritime player has come forward to the bank requesting for this lending or loan facility, would sit and assess the tenure that they would require to repay back. So for assets financing, this could be up to 5 years. And for working capital, it's a structure or revolving, depending on the conversion cycle, of maximum up to 12 months. And moratorium is 24 months. And for working capital is up to 60 days. The vessel age, there was a speaker who obviously highlighted the fact that maritime vessel or equipment are normally very aged. So obviously as bankers or as commercial bank, we are keen to finance or to support financing mechanism for vessels that are maximum up to 40 years only, inclusive of the loan tenure itself. Older than that, that might be difficult for the banks to support. Financing limits, and here we're looking at now the equity contribution that will be required by the maritime player. So the financing limits will be ranging from 70 to 80% for new vessels. That is for asset financing. Should you be requiring to buy a brand new ship, we are able to finance up to between 70 to 8% for a new one, and 50 to 7% for a used one. And security now, with security, we have a number of options that can be offered as security for you to be able now to proceed and get a loan from commercial bank or from any branch of equity. So this would be, the vessel itself could be used as a security. Second, any other conventional collateral could also be used. Machinery and hull insurance policies, protection and indemnity, and these are applicable both ways in asset financing and working capital. And lastly, we also look at company and the people, the capacity that previous speakers have also spoke about. The vessel ownership has to be over 2 years, and the industry experience of the key staff members is 5 years. Now, while the presentations were being done, especially with the equipment that are decarbonized or net zero, I was just thinking around the requirement of skill development to these vessels and some of this requirement of commercial bank. So these are where maybe maritime administrators and commercial bank would need to sit and see some of these requirements, especially in the skills of administrators of vessels that are being financed by commercial bank. And lastly, interest rate. Now this is the very debated aspect of the loan. And of course, it's based on the market condition, the risk assessment or risk profile of the applicant and the risk-based financing that we have. So it ranges also the type of facility you are seeking and all other parameters. So, dear delegates, these are some or two of the examples of facilities that maritime administrators, stakeholders and players could access to get financing, especially working capital financing to be able to run day-to-day operations, or asset financing for that case, to purchase new equipment, new assets, new vessels to foster the sector forward. And that is not all. There are other financial offering in the marine ecosystem, and that is project financing, as I said earlier, that is to support seaport infrastructure, very specific targeted projects which would require heavy capital investments, structured finance. These are trade window financing, the likes of letters of credits and guarantees. Maritime insurance solutions, we do offer machinery and hull protection and indemnity arrangements, and marine cargo insurance. And not least, payment and collection management. I understand some of the port operators are already collecting levies and charges and the likes. For more efficiency improvement, partnerships with banks like Equity could enable effective collection and monitoring of these funds that are collected. Okay, a few case studies, of course not to share so much of the specifics of the projects. Equity Bank has already supported the maritime infrastructure projects in Mombasa, bulk handling infrastructure that included stevedoring equipment, bulk cargo conveyors and storage facilities. Another example again is from Mombasa Port LPG project, bulk carries and stevedoring and gas pipeline. And back home now in Tanzania, we have financed Lake Victoria bulk oil transport vessels, fish farm in Lake Victoria, including cage culture, cold chain trucks and ice making, and fish vessels in Lake Victoria and Indian Ocean. Now, maybe just to wind up my presentation, there was a lot of financing needs, financing requirement. Anything that needs to be done in terms of decarbonization, improving sustainability, or improving the state of our ports, our shipping, and the overall maritime sector would require finance, would require money. So grants themselves might not suffice. Other budgetary provisions also might not suffice. But it's high time Africa start looking back into the internal commercial banks and working with internal commercial banks so that we can be able to finance ourselves these transitions. We can be able to finance ourselves this transformation. With that, dear delegates, I end my presentation and I welcome and invite you to Equity Bank branches for more support across the region. As I said, we are existing in 7 countries. Please feel free to reach out to us so that we can support your financing needs from the commercial banking perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you very much. You've just heard it, and there is money to be obtained to make you run your business. So, Vincent, you'll help us save a bit of time by going tap, 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 finished. Vincent is the Senior Deputy Director, Technical Cooperation and Implementation of Division of IMO, very instrumental in assembling us here together, and is going to be instrumental in telling you many of the development projects that IMO does to make us strong as AMA. Karibu. Yes.
Okay. So my slide is on, and I'm going to try as much as possible to be brief. I know when it comes to IMO Technical Cooperation Program, most of you are very much aware of this program, and I don't think I need to preach to the converted. But I can say this, why are we running it? It's because we want member states to be in a position to implement and to be able to ratify, domesticate, and implement IMO instruments. What are our areas of interest? We are very keen on safety. We are keen on environment. Can you see my slide? Is it clear? Sorry. I'm not sure. Okay. Can make it larger. Okay. Good. So we are keen on safety, on environment, on efficiencies, including digitalization, on liability and compensation, on legislation, drafting of legislation, and so on and so forth, including mainstreaming women in maritime. And then we also do the IMO member states audit to basically help you gauge where you are in the scheme of things. Sorry. Okay. On how we deliver, we assist member states in achieving their TC priorities by carrying out technical advisory activities, including your need assessment, looking at your country maritime profile, looking at outcomes of the member states audit and your corrective action plan, and also taking into consideration requests that you've made of us of areas where you need our intervention. We also train. We train to help in building capacity. From 2017 to date, we've trained over 13,000 maritime personnel in countries around the world. We have a very, very vibrant regional presence. I can quickly show you. where we are located around the world, and Africa is very central to our Maritime Presence program. We have 3 offices in Africa, Africa alone, 1 in Kenya, covering Eastern and Southern Africa. We have an office in Ghana, regional presence office in Ghana, covering West and Central Africa. We have an office in Côte d'Ivoire, covering African Francophone, and we have an office in Egypt. We're just setting that up, covering the Middle Eastern countries. We also have offices, other offices around the world, in the Philippines, in the Pacific, Fiji, in the Caribbean. Now, what we do could be either single activities, that's our ITCP program, to address specific needs, or major projects. And we also have other activities. But my focus today will be on major projects. And I'll be talking to you more on what we do on major projects, because I know most of you are familiar with the ITCP side of things. Okay. So going to major projects. Okay. Before I go to major projects, you saw the brilliant performance of our lecturers from WMU and IMLI. They were able to take us through the length and breadth of the challenges in the industry. They are IMO institutions. They were set up by IMO for that purpose. And they are available to you. And I know there are so many WMU graduates in the room, and IMLI graduates, many. And together we can help change the narrative and help decarbonize Africa by not only capacity building, but capacity sharing. We also have e-learning materials, and that came out during the last session. IMO has built an extensive e-learning portfolio where you can actually go through things without necessarily having to wait until you have a classroom session. And this portfolio continues to increase. For our regional presence, we have so many activities, from environment, maritime safety and security, to general legal training, gender-related issues. And on the environment side, we continue to increase our portfolio, more and more environmental-related projects. I mentioned member states audit, but we'll have a session tomorrow morning where we'll be able to do a deep dive into member states audit. So I'll now jump over to major projects. Now we have 2 major projects. We have ocean projects, and then we have Green Voyage, GHG projects. Now on ocean projects, we have quite a number of portfolios. They're all on the screen: the grow fouling, the glow litter, the red litter, the text bar fouling, the glow noise. Now, all these projects are projects by their very nature. And as a member state, you are free to apply to these projects. You are pleased to put in applications to be part of this project. For example, the biofouling program, we had lead partnership countries, Madagascar and Mauritius, when they were launched, and we also have partnering countries. We've done activity in Comoros. There are projects ongoing there in Djibouti, in Sudan, Somalia, and Nigeria. We have Ocean Litter Program. That's the Glow Litter Partnership, which is currently ongoing. And we have a few countries, the lead countries and other countries. You can see them on the screen. This project will now lead to the Pro-C Global Project. Detailed information on these projects are available on the IMO public website. We also have the Marine Noise Program, the Grow Noise Partnership, and a few of our AMA members had already benefited, South Africa and Madagascar. Now, the GHG project portfolio is also an impressive one. And the flagship of those is the Green Voyage 2050. A few countries have also benefited. Ghana was telling you today that they've recently been given the okay to participate in the project in 2050. I'm also sure Nigeria has also benefited from an award to participate in the project, and another African country. Now let's look at the Green Voyage, which is currently at the National Action Plan development level. Kenya has gone through this process with baseline assessment, initial stakeholder workshop. They're currently developing their NAP, and there'll be a validation and adoption. And then you have the Green Voyage 2050, where South Africa has benefited greatly, and the project is still ongoing. We also have the GMN 2 pilot project in Africa. Mauritius is currently benefiting from this. It's a GHG reduction in marine operation with circular bio-derived fuel and hydrogen technology. There's also a pilot project in Namibia along the same lines. So we have so many environmental related projects that you can key in on. Some of these projects are donor funded, so your application will have to be competitive, and if it's good enough, you are almost certain to get funding for the project. These are the projects that we have on our GHG in our technical cooperation activity for 2025. I have a few of them on. And that's the end of my presentation, just to be brief. Thank you.
Okay. We are done with the presentations. Just a few assignments that I'm giving you out of those presentations, then I call the panelists. James has told us his readiness. Are we ready to walk through the green path? And then he has told us that challenges are opportunities. We need to convert them. Then through trust funds, they are mobilizing resources, and they are allocating a big portion to deal with the maritime infrastructure development. So he's just told us how money in the climate change initiatives, it is in the climate change initiatives, and so maritime people is asking, where are you? James will be available during the cocktail so that you can get you the details. These proposals that they are inviting people to apply for, how can you be able to reach out? And he has also agreed to give us links so that if you are seriously here to get engaged in these kind of opportunities, please get in touch with James. He will be with us during the AMA sessions to give us more information on these particular matters. We thank you, Helen, for coming in and telling us the scope of your operations in the 7 countries and the recovery, the Africa Recovery Salient Plans, and how you are implementing it. These ones are there to help you to recover. Perhaps if you get the details, even in terms of supporting your development programs, the interests are not the typical commercial bank rates. They could go as low as 2.5%. Did I hear that? But you can get the details from her even as you discuss that. And thank you, Vincent, for giving us a snapshot of what IMO does, both in terms of capacity development. We are beneficiaries of that development and very proud of it. And many others here, as you had seen. And we continue to urge you to continue doing this very, very good work. And definitely, the continent owes a lot to IMO in terms of bringing up the development that we need within the maritime sector. So then, we are in the panel session. Again, I want to remind the panelists that we are fighting for attention. It has been a very long day and people are very tired, so you'll be very, 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 very short in your contribution to this particular debate. Like I told you, Humphrey Kibiki is a manager, sustainable finance monitoring and evaluation at CRDB Bank. And I will invite him to tell us what role can financial institutions play in financing sustainable maritime transport. We have heard, but just from your point of view, just give us a few minutes of what role can they play in financing sustainable maritime transport. In 5 minutes, yes.
Thank you. Again, my name is Hailo Hanflekibiki, so from the CRDB Bank. So also being a commercial bank, my focus will be in sustainability, so in sustainability and climate finance opportunity. CRDB Bank has a dedicated, our strategic, we have a dedicated department on the sustainability, and we have done a lot. So in this space of maritime, we have been financing across the sector, including the maritime. So what I can stress here in matter of time is CRDB Bank is sole accredited entity of the GCF. So we are only Tanzanian accredited, and we are accredited as direct access. This means that we are now in capacity to mobilize funds from the GCF for the adaptation and mitigation of climate change. So we are taking this opportunity to develop the climate action and to ensure we mobilize blended financing to reach the community and various partners on our portfolio and our area we operate. Being noted that CRDB Bank, we are also existing at Burundi and also in Congo. So we have a viable chance and opportunities to work using this opportunity we have in accreditation of the GCF. Maybe for the vivid example and the practical one, we are currently finalizing the funding proposal to mobilize funds from the Green Climate Fund for the so-called blue economy, with which the maritime vessel transport, as you asked Mr. Moderator, is one of the key aspects as well. Is well analyzed, and we are sure that we are going to achieve it because as of now we have a very good experience of implementing the adaptation programs. After being accredited from the Green Climate Fund, we are now under implementation of the adaptation on the agriculture, with which also part of the aquaculture is part of one of it, but also we have a very good experience on mobilizing the technical assistance, where we work with the various entities, especially government, where also the Minister of Agriculture, also in livestock and fisheries, are one of them. So we sure that, and we welcome an individual and here to sit down and see the opportunity of using the private sector facility from the GCF, but also us being the commercial bank, but also accredited, but also where we are driving this climate finance through the net zero. We have a very good opportunity. That one of the advantage of using the Green Climate Fund is it going beyond to the business as usual lending, especially in the interest. So we are going to provide the very concessional terms, but also with the other financial instruments within it, including grants, including insurance. So we ensure that if you see of course now it is very closely, what we are preparing, the package, which also going to save the maritime, it try to address both parts on mitigation and adaptation of climate change, which this is one of the exact area and objective of the Green Climate Fund. But I can stress also internally, CRDB Bank, practically now, last year we mobilized more than 65 million for the green bond. So it is under implementation now. And this green bond, it worked very well. We oversubscribed than what we had intended. And one of the key area to focus is in the maritime, in blue, in the fishery. So we have this money now when I'm talking. But also we have other opportunity to mobilize other part of the program within a green bond. And maybe I can stress that just only today, CRDB Bank have been leading to mobilize more than 350 million on the Samia bond today. I think some of you have been heard, and this is just for infrastructure. So I want to show how the CRDB Bank, being local, but also we are present in the region. We are very happy and we are flexible to come and have the blended on a private public partnership and have a blended financing through this opportunity we have internally ourselves for our portfolio, but also to mobilize from the other sources, but particularly with this advantage of being the only accredited entity. Maybe I can, now I know time is gone, I can stress it out. So our accreditation to the GCF, now being the local, we can mobilize up to 250 million per single project. So we can have more than project at a time, but more than 250 for single project. And where we believe with the good guidance from the ministry and from the partners here, local and international, where we are present, we can mobilize, if you have these 250, just to make sure to implement on the mitigation and adaptation, which including maritime infrastructure on transport and the supporting ecosystem, but also other advantage of the technical assistance, also some guarantee instruments, and also even insurance, which is actually is not very common to be in one instrument. So this advantage, I think, is good. But finally, now I'm finished, is we are working very well with the government, as I said. We've been financing the fiber boats in Zanzibar, and we also finance across the coast of the Indian Ocean. So I want to welcome you all to use this our sustainability strategy and to use this our accreditation status for the Green Climate Fund, and also we have money in place for the Green Bond to make sure we talk to the area we operate, I've mentioned, and to make sure we serve this maritime sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Dr. Jovins. Thank you. Can you give him a big round of clap? All those are opportunities which are open. Now, Dr. Jovin, you are in an institution that has done a lot, particularly in Kenya, and we have interacted a lot. Dr. Jovin, we interacted a lot on infrastructure development at the port of Mombasa, and now you are also in Tanzania and many other areas. Please just share with us what are the key financial challenges facing African maritime sector from the experience that you have had in kind of support that you have given. In 5 minutes, please just tell us the key financial challenges that you've encountered in your work that are facing the African maritime sector.
Thank you, moderator. Probably, as you indicated, allow me to introduce the institution that I'm representing, and that is Trademark Africa, which operates across Africa in different regions of Africa. And our mandate is to support sustainable and inclusive trade in Africa. And when you talk about sustainable and inclusive trade, while 90% of trade is carried by ship, we become natural collaborators and partners to the maritime administrations. So going back to the question, I'm going to create, for the interest of discussion, I'm going to create some sort of controversy by answering it probably in a different way. We have the representative from the banks here who have said candidly that for the projects in Africa, financing is not a problem. For the maritime industry in Africa, financing is not a problem. And I agree with them because I've been involved with multilateral banks, with the donors about funding maritime projects in Africa. But there is a caveat to it. I understand the projects are of different nature. The financially viable maritime projects in Africa have no challenges of attracting funds. I underscore the point raised by an earlier speaker, James. The key problem that we face, we have like 2, 3. One, conceptualizing and structuring viable projects that are bankable.
Mhm.
So if we overcome that, that is a bigger problem than financing.
Mhm.
The second problem we have is the capacity to absorb the available financing in terms of delivery, but again, willingness to absorb the available funding. There are quite a number of examples where we have projects, especially in this region, that were packaged from 2010, 2012, very viable. You don't see them being implemented. Why? Because apart from the money being available, apart from the project being viable, the readiness to invest and make use of the available resources, transform this concept into realities, they are simply not there, or probably the time is not right to go into that. I've been involved in quite a number of structuring several maritime projects. Some of them have taken off, some of them haven't taken off, not because money is not there, but readiness, capacity, and all that. So, on the challenges, I would like to be as brief as this, but again, to get a minute to tell what we are doing, with my institution, what we are doing to address those challenges. Is that okay with you?
Yes, quickly, in a very summarized manner.
Sure. As Trademark Africa, we have we are working with our commercial arm, which is Trade Catalyst Africa, and we have a number of funding windows, some of which we are already working with the maritime authorities and ports to unlock some of the challenges, or rather to address some of the challenges. One, as Trademark Africa, we are funded by a range of donors, bilateral, multilateral, and institutional funders. And because of that, we are using mainly grant funding. And this one, we are applying it on critical infrastructure that facilitates trade. Could be port access road, could be widening the port gate, could be a bypass in a city that is linked to the port, so that we unlock trade. And we have been doing that with a number of countries. I'm not going to go into details. We see for trade to be successful, we noted ports need support on digitizing their processes, and we are already working with some of the maritime administrations to implement the maritime single window, which became mandatory this year. So we are in that space, but we are working with the ports to make their gates smart, introduction of smart gates. But also we are into greening ports, where we are working with some of the ports to provide some reefer plugs so that perishables can be transported easily by sea, so that we're in that space for trade. But again, we have seen sometimes the regulatory framework globally with respect to climate change will not favor transporting some of the goods by air. So we have done a proof of concept to move goods from air to sea. So we are bringing business to sea. That is one of the windows we have. And quickly, with our commercial arm, we are introducing a blended finance, ethical financing window, which seeks to combine grant funding with commercial funding, but packaged in an ethical way, not primarily focusing on profit, but rather facilitation of trade, and that can also apply to the maritime industry. Recognizing the problem of structuring and packaging project, we have come up with a project preparation and structuring window, which we can work with the teams to structure viable projects in the maritime space. And lastly, we have a trade financing window. This is mainly to catalyze, to become inclusive, to help SMEs, small traders to get engaged, and that could include the maritime industry. We're already working with some partners to support the fish value chain for the small traders. We are working with partners in Zanzibar to support women who are in seaweed. I know time is a constraint.
Yes.
Let me stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you, Jovin, for telling us all that. To Dr.
Anthony Ekundayo as the DG of a very powerful administration in Africa, NIBASA, who is quite familiar with what are the main challenges. I'll give you a similar question. The financial challenges facing African maritime sector, and in your opinion, how can these challenges be overcome from the administration's point of view? Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I would have loved to have spoken before the financial entities come to tell us what they have available for us. Because what is most important is for the financial entities to understand what are the issues, what are the challenges that we are going through before they can consider and come up with what should be the solutions, right? Well, is a broad prospect, and the first one has been talked about, which is limited access to capital. However, from what I've listened so far from the solutions provided, the key point was never mentioned, which is the competitiveness. What gives us, the maritime administrators, the shipping companies, the ability to compete internationally, and that is the cost of financing. Mm-hmm. If the interest rate is going to be more than a single digital interest rate, then we've already lost the competitive edge to compete with the likes of the developed maritime nations. So, I'll give you an example. Mm-hmm. In Kenya, in Korea, the interest rate is 2.5. In France, the interest rate is 3.6. Mm-hmm. And all of those developed countries have interest rates below 5% for acquisition of shipbuilding or acquisition of second-hand vessels. But for African countries, is anything from 15%, 18%, 20%, 22%. That has actually taken away the competitive edge for us. So we need a paradigm shift in this area. I know you are accountable to shareholders, but you can also get government support in order to lower the interest rate that is given to the shipping companies. A classic example, which I was going to say last, but I'll bring it forward now, is what we are doing in Nigeria. We have what we call cabotage finance vessel policy, which means that every vessel that comes into Nigeria water, we take 2% of the trade and keep it on the side to develop our shipping development. And by so doing, we have some funds available in which we can use to leverage when we go to the PLIs, to say that there is some 20-30% available for this ship owner. So you are going to lend the ship owner another 40%, and he is going to bring in his own 30%. So on our own 30%, that should bring the interest rate to less than 10%. And I'm sure if most of the countries here, African countries, can look at that dynamism and bring it on board, you find that it's easier for the shipping company to be able to have access to the funding that is required for them to access and be able to buy the vessels. The second one, which we need a lot of support, is areas of regulations as well as capacity building, which has been mentioned here. Regulation in the sense that the government of Africa and most times tend to change policies on regular basis. So we need to keep them informed, and in order to maintain these regulatory policies and make it standard, so it would allow for forecasting parameters that is required for financial analysis to be worked out for a vessel that needs to be leased or purchased for 20 years or 30 years. So such things are also required to help. Again, we talk of capacity building. We in the MASA, most importantly, we are putting our resources in training our seafarers. I've heard the earlier section that took place that we lack seafarers in Africa. Now, without the seafarers, there is no maritime sector. Without maritime sector, there is no international business. So the seafarers are the drivers. So we need to spend a lot of money to train them adequately and be able to play the market in Africa. Not Africa alone, but also internationally. The countries like India, Philippines are actually exporting their own seafarers to the extent that the income generated by Philippines on an annual basis from the seafarers is in the region of $6.5 billion to the economy of the government. And so we need to do such things. So what am I saying in total is that the financial institutions together with the maritime sectors need to come together and move away from the traditional ways of doing business and move to the ways that can help the African sector to develop the shipping nation as well as the port and other facilities that are required to move this business forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you very much. Can you give me a big round of applause? I think we are short of time. I don't know whether Mr. Sui of International Cooperation of China, he was to tell us something about the support opportunities that are available through international aid agencies. I don't know whether the technical guys, whether he's still with us or he has, we have taken a long time and we want to wind up. Mr. Baher, for 3 minutes, just 3 minutes, we have run sort of time. Please, just tell us very briefly for 3 minutes, then we wind up.
Thank you very much. I know I am the last speaker before the cocktails, the dinner, for going home. So I'll try to even do it in less than 3 minutes. said, so I'm not going to repeat it. I find the point that was made by the last speaker very interesting, and maybe that's useful, focusing on the question of interest rates, because that relates directly to the issue of financing. The most common model for ports has been the landlord model, and international financial institutions typically go provide the part of the government, and then that helps attract reputable international operators that have their cheap resources. So that already helps in bringing down the interest rate. And that model, in fact, we do have a project in the port of Dar es Salaam, very close to where you are, in which this model is applied by the port. The World Bank has helped in the reconstruction of the berths, and then they are attracting international operators. What I want to say again, I'm trying to expand the pie, because there's never going to be enough resources from international financial institutions which come at favorable rates for the financing of all the port needs. So one of the things you start seeing now is that some of these ports are also financially viable, even if we include in some of the breakworks and some of the infrastructure. So one possibility is to go beyond just having the operator finance the cranes and the gantries and that, to also taking part in some of the infrastructure as well. That would broaden the pie that we're talking about. Now, again, continuing on the same point of how to make the financing more attractive, the International Finance Corporation, which is the private side of the World Bank Group, does get involved a lot in financing and mobilizing financing. It's mobilized, I believe, over 5 billion for the port sector in the past maybe 15 years or so. That's not just the money they put in, but the money that they're able to attract. That again would come at somewhat favorable rates. One point that I didn't quite hear much about directly in the presentations was guarantees. And that's something, again, that the World Bank can offer through the World Bank itself, through the Multilateral Investment Group, APC, MIGA. And what that does is it helps exactly responding to the point that the previous speaker made. It comes in and it brings down the cost, because that high interest rate, it reflects risk. If that risk is addressed, then that comes down. And the last point I'm going to make on this is, yes, capacity, and this relates to the point that my colleague from Trademark made as well. The capacity development is critical. Improving the efficiency, not just in the port, but the corridors linking to the ports. All that, if you're coming in as an investor and you see these risks, that's going to raise the cost. So all these need to be addressed. Building capacity, so that we have the bankable projects that were mentioned earlier. This is lacking, and this is something that I know that we're all working on, but it's something to keep in mind. So this is what I wanted to say on these points. One last point, since we are talking about sustainable financing, it's all very good and critical that we are talking about the climate mitigation and greening the ports. But one thing that we really need to keep in mind, Africa produces a tiny, tiny percentage of the green gas emissions. However, Africa gets ravaged by the floods, by the climate disasters. So we need a lot more focus of the funds on adaptation. Right now, most of the funds available are going to mitigation. One of the areas that the World Bank is pushing hard with those contributing the climate funds is to try to have a balance, maybe 50% for adaptation, 50% for mitigation. I just wanted to leave with this final message, and I believe I have done this, Chair, in less than 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow. We should have put money in the morning and given it a lot more time, but because we are constrained on time, I just want us to give a very big round of claps to all our presenters and the finalists. And I call the MC to come and guide us on how to cock this tail. Is it how to go for the cocktail? I don't know whether that's the right English. Yes. Yes. So thank you so much, presenters. I think there is a photo, a small photo here that they can take, and then we move on.
I think the expression is to wag the tail. Yeah, if you're not really sure anything about a tail, don't say anything. All right, we'll take a photo, a group photo, and let's put our hands together, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for keeping it lively. And it was serious, but at the same time, very robust. So we appreciate that very much. So I have a few announcements to make, and we've come to the end of the day. We don't want to waste any more time here. We have had a good day today, although we are